What would you think if I told you that every man you encounter sees you through a lens he can never fully wipe clean? That in you, there is something so deeply woven into his unconscious that, try as he might, he will never forget. It is not merely the shape of your body or the elegance of your movements, but something deeper, darker, more powerful. You hold within you a force, the archetype of the feminine, that reaches beyond what the world tells him to seek, beyond his projections, beyond his desires. What he sees in you, he will not fully comprehend, for it is beyond the grasp of mere reason. It is the projection of his deepest unconscious desires, his most hidden fears, his forgotten self. You, in his eyes, are both the treasure and the terror, the angel and the demon. For Jung, the psyche is an intricate labyrinth, and within it lie parts of us so primal, so untouched. They can only surface through symbols, through shadows, through our deepest longings. And in the woman, he finds the shadow he cannot outrun. She is both his muse and his undoing. The woman he cannot forget is the one who, knowingly or unknowingly, awakens this part of him. She is the living embodiment of his anima, the unconscious feminine aspect of his psyche that he has either repressed or neglected. But this anima is not a mere reflection of the woman's external traits. It is far deeper, rooted in the mythology of the unconscious. She represents the soul he has lost touch with, the emotional depth he has denied himself, and the vulnerability he is afraid to explore. She calls him to confront himself, to reckon with the parts of him he has abandoned, the parts of him that seek depth and meaning beyond the surface of life. And when he encounters her, this woman, this archetype, he is undone. It is not the external, surface-level attributes that captivate him. No, it is something far more potent. It is the way she embodies mystery. The way her silence speaks louder than words, the way her presence calls forth all his unacknowledged feelings, all his repressed longing. Have you ever felt the weight of a man's gaze, lingering just long enough to make you wonder what he sees? It is not the woman you present outwardly, it is the woman buried within, the one he is subconsciously drawn to. The one who represents everything he has not yet embraced in himself. He cannot escape her, for she is the keeper of his unconscious world. He may try to ignore her, to rationalize his feelings, but she is a force, a magnetic force that exists beyond his control. There is a profound power in silence, a power in the way a woman can leave a man in the void of unspoken words. Silence, as Jung knew, is the language of the unconscious. It is in those moments when words fail, when communication is stripped to its essence, that the deepest truths are revealed. And what does silence reveal? It reveals the raw vulnerability of the self, the core of who we are, stripped of pretense. When a woman is silent, not through submission or passivity, but through her own inner strength and sovereignty, she draws him into a space where the only thing left is truth, the truth he is terrified to face. This silence is not the absence of communication, but the presence of something much more powerful, the full, embodied expression of a woman's autonomy. It is the silence of a woman who has come into herself, who is not defined by the words or expectations of others, but by the quiet certainty of her own soul. In her silence, he is faced with his own inadequacies, his own fears. His projections of her are no longer enough to hold her, because she is not bound by them. And in this freedom, he finds himself caught between desire and fear. But it is not only the silence that drives him wild. It is what that silence evokes in him, the existential uncertainty, the confrontation with the unknown parts of himself. The moment a man encounters a woman who holds her ground, who does not chase validation or approval, he is forced to confront his own insecurities. He sees in her a reflection of all that he has not yet mastered: his fear of intimacy, his lack of emotional depth, his inability to connect with his own feelings. In her presence, his ego crumbles, and he is reminded of his own fragility. He is both repelled and drawn in, caught in the tension between the shadow of his own soul and the light of hers. What is it, then, that he sees in her? He sees his own shadow, his own neglected parts, yearning to be integrated. He sees his own feminine essence, suppressed and ignored, begging to be embraced. She is the mirror that reflects all he has not yet accepted in himself. And though he may seek to control her, to possess her, he cannot. She is the embodiment of his unconscious. A force that is as wild and untamable as the instincts he has long denied. Do you feel the power in this? The power of the woman who knows herself, who is not swayed by the fleeting desires of the world or the projections of the men around her. The power of the woman who understands that her worth does not lie in the validation of others, but in the deep, unwavering connection to her own soul. When a man encounters this woman, he is undone, for he has encountered not just her, but the very parts of himself he has long ignored. And in this confrontation, there is both fear and awe, desire and destruction. He may never forget her, for she is the woman who holds the key to his own transformation. As the days pass, the memory of her lingers in his mind, like an echo that refuses to fade. But it is not just her image that haunts him, it is the depth of her silence, the strength of her inner world, the way she exists without needing to prove herself. Therein lies her most unsettling power, the refusal to be defined, the refusal to seek approval. In a world that thrives on validation and constant movement, she stands as a silent defiance. She is the pause in a world of noise, the stillness in the face of chaos. And it is this very stillness that drives him to madness, for in her, he sees all the parts of himself he has long neglected. Her silence is not the absence of words, but the presence of something far more profound. It is the stillness of a soul that has accepted its own worth, that has embraced its own shadow. The feminine, in its truest form, does not chase after external validation, for it is rooted in the deep knowing of its own value. She has transcended the need for affirmation from others, and in doing so, she becomes a force that cannot be controlled, cannot be tamed. She becomes the embodiment of autonomy, the living example of the wisdom of the soul. In her presence, he is forced to reckon with his own inadequacies, to confront the parts of himself he has long avoided. His ego, which thrives on external accomplishments and the approval of others, stands in stark contrast to her quiet confidence. But this is where the tension lies. For as much as he desires her, he also fears her. She represents everything he has not yet mastered in himself. She is the embodiment of the unconscious feminine, the anima, and as much as he is drawn to her, he is repelled by the sheer magnitude of her power. She is a reflection of the emotional depth and vulnerability he has never fully explored, a reflection of the inner world he has long neglected. In her silence, she speaks volumes not just about who she is, but about the parts of him that remain hidden, the parts he is too afraid to face. This is the power of the feminine archetype. It is the power to awaken the unconscious, to bring to light the parts of the soul that have been repressed or ignored. The woman who embodies this archetype is a living mirror to the man's inner world. She is both the muse and the challenge, the angel and the demon. In her presence, he is forced to confront the shadow within himself, to reckon with the parts of himself that long to be integrated. And it is in this confrontation that true transformation begins. But how does he react to this? Initially, he may be drawn to her, seduced by the mystery and the depth she embodies. He may try to win her over, to gain her approval, to possess her in the way he has learned to possess other things in life. He may project his fantasies onto her, seeing her as the answer to all his unmet desires. But soon, he will realize that this woman cannot be possessed. She is not a prize to be won, but a force to be reckoned with. And as he comes to understand this, he is faced with a choice: to surrender to her power, to embrace the parts of himself he has long rejected, or to retreat in fear, holding on to the ego-driven illusions that have defined him thus far. The man who encounters such a woman finds himself at a crossroads. He is forced to confront his own vulnerabilities, his own emotional blockages, and his own fears of intimacy. In her presence, he is asked to let go of the surface-level distractions and face the truth of his own soul. And for many men, this is an uncomfortable journey. It requires them to step out of the protective shell of their ego, to let go of their need for control, and to open themselves up to the unknown. But it is in this vulnerability that true transformation occurs. It is in this surrender that the man is reborn. What makes the woman who embodies this power so unforgettable is not just her external beauty, but her internal strength. It is the strength to be herself, to remain true to her own soul, regardless of the expectations of the world around her. She is not swayed by the need for approval, for she knows that her worth is inherent, not earned. And this, above all, is what drives him wild. For in her, he sees the possibility of something greater than himself, the possibility of becoming whole. But this journey is not without its challenges. The man who encounters such a woman must navigate the complex terrain of his own psyche. He must confront the unconscious forces that shape his desires, his fears, and his projections. And in doing so, he is asked to face the deepest parts of himself, the parts that long for depth, for connection, for meaning. The man who dares to enter this realm is not merely seeking a woman, but seeking himself. He is seeking to reconcile the light and the shadow within, to integrate the unconscious aspects of his soul that have been long neglected. And when he finally accepts this truth, when he surrenders to the power of the feminine, to the force of the anima, he is forever changed. No longer is he bound by the superficial, ego-driven pursuits that once defined him. He has encountered the depths of his own soul, and in doing so, he has come face to face with the woman he can never forget. For she is not just a reflection of his desires, but a reflection of the deepest parts of himself. In the aftermath of this encounter, something shifts within him, deep beneath the surface. He no longer sees the world in the same way. His interactions with women, with the world itself, are no longer defined by the limitations of his ego. The woman he cannot forget, the one who embodies the archetype of the feminine, has opened him up to a world he never knew existed. He begins to see that the pursuit of external validation, of achievement and success, is not the path to true fulfillment. What he has always sought in the world around him, admiration, conquest, control, has been a distraction from the deeper yearning within his soul. The truth that the woman embodies, the quiet, unwavering strength of her being, has shown him that true power lies not in outward dominance or control, but in inner sovereignty. She is the living example of self-sufficiency, of emotional depth, of spiritual autonomy. In her presence, he is reminded that the journey of individuation is not one of external achievement, but one of internal integration. The masculine, with its focus on the external world, must learn to embrace the feminine, to integrate the qualities of receptivity, introspection, and vulnerability that he has long denied. Jung's concept of the anima, the feminine aspect of the male psyche, is not merely a psychological projection, but a deep, inherent part of his being. The woman who awakens this anima in him is not just a reflection of his desires, but a guide on the path to self-realization. She holds the key to his inner world, to the parts of him that are locked away in the unconscious. She forces him to confront the shadows within, to face the aspects of himself that he has long repressed or ignored. And in this confrontation, he is both terrified and exhilarated. For in the anima, he encounters the fullness of his own being, the totality of his soul. But this is not an easy journey. To truly integrate the anima is to let go of the ego's need for control, to surrender to the mystery of life itself. The man who embarks on this journey is asked to confront his own limitations, to relinquish his rigid notions of identity, and to embrace the fluidity and depth of the unconscious. And in doing so, he is reborn. He no longer sees the world through the narrow lens of his ego, but through the expansive, all-encompassing vision of the soul. And this is where the feminine, in its most powerful form, comes into play. The woman who embodies this deep inner strength does not chase after the approval of others, does not seek to define herself by the roles the world has assigned her. She is a force unto herself. She is not bound by the need for external validation, for she knows that her worth is intrinsic, that it comes from the very core of her being. In her, the man sees the possibility of true freedom, freedom from the constraints of ego, freedom from the superficial, freedom from the endless striving for external success. She is not a reflection of his desires, but a reflection of his own soul's longing for wholeness. And in this reflection, he is forced to face the most uncomfortable truth of all: that his external world is but a shadow of his inner reality. His pursuit of power, of control, of success, these are distractions from the deeper work of the soul. The man who encounters the woman who embodies the anima is forced to let go of his illusions and confront the depth of his own being. And it is in this confrontation that he finds his true self. This is the ultimate gift of the feminine, the ability to lead the man back to himself, to help him reconnect with the deeper, more authentic parts of his soul. She is not merely an object of desire, but a catalyst for transformation. In her presence, the man is invited to step into his own power, to shed the false layers of identity he has constructed, and to become the fully integrated version of himself. This is the work of individuation, the journey toward wholeness, the process of integrating the conscious and unconscious aspects of the self. And it is through the encounter with the feminine, with the woman who cannot be controlled, who cannot be defined, that the man begins this journey. But this transformation is not an overnight process. It takes time, effort, and courage to confront the parts of the self that have long been hidden. The man who encounters this woman must be willing to face his own darkness, to dive into the unknown realms of his unconscious. But in doing so, he becomes more than he ever imagined. He becomes whole, integrated, and free. And in this freedom, he finds peace. For the woman who embodies the archetype of the feminine has not only awakened his soul, she has set him on a path of self-realization, of true autonomy, of profound inner peace. The woman who knows her worth, who stands in her own power, does not chase after validation. She is not swayed by the opinions of others, for she knows that her worth is inherent, unshakable. She does not seek approval or external recognition, for she is already whole. And this, above all, is what drives him insane, for in her, he sees the possibility of a life lived authentically. A life free from the constraints of the ego, a life where he can fully embrace his own soul. The woman who embodies this power is unforgettable, not because of her beauty, her charm, or her allure, but because of the depth of her being. She is a living testament to the power of self-worth, to the strength of the feminine, to the transformative power of the unconscious. And the man who encounters her is forever changed, for he has encountered not just a woman, but the deepest parts of himself. In the moments after his encounter with her, the man begins to see that the world he once knew is a mere illusion. His ego-driven pursuits, his outward achievements, the validation he sought from the world, all of it begins to lose its meaning. It is not the things he has built, nor the people who have approved of him, that define his worth. No, it is the silent, unspoken truth within, the truth that she, this woman, has awakened in him. She has shown him that true fulfillment comes not from external sources, but from the deep well of his own soul. What he feels now is not just the remnants of attraction, nor the residue of desire. It is something far more profound, the stirring of a part of himself he has long forgotten. She has opened a door within him, a door to the unconscious, and in doing so, she has called him to embark on the most important journey of all, the journey towards self-knowledge. Through her, he begins to recognize that the man he thought he was, the man driven by ambition, power, and control, is only a shadow of who he can truly become. But this awakening is not without its challenges. As he journeys deeper into the self, he encounters resistance, the ego's desperate clinging to its false sense of identity. The ego, which has long been the driving force behind his actions, is threatened by the deeper truth he is now being called to embrace. It will fight him every step of the way, convincing him that his worth lies in his achievements, in his ability to control, in his ability to project an image of success to the world. The journey of individuation is not for the faint of heart, for it requires the courage to face one's own shadow, those aspects of the self that are often buried in the darkness of the unconscious. But the woman, the embodiment of the anima, does not seek to pull him away from this journey. She stands as both a guide and a challenge, a reflection of the unconscious forces he must learn to integrate. She does not offer him comfort or reassurance. Instead, she asks him to step into the unknown, to face the parts of himself that he has long denied. She does not chase after him or demand his attention. She simply exists in her own power, unwavering, embodying the very qualities he needs to integrate in order to become whole. And it is this silence, her absolute stillness, that holds the most power. It is not a passive silence, but an active one. In her silence, she reveals her own strength, her own autonomy. She is not waiting for the world to define her. She is already defined, already whole. And in this way, she teaches him the most important lesson of all. That true strength lies in the ability to stand firm in one's own truth, to be anchored in the deep knowing of one's own worth, regardless of the opinions of others. The man who encounters her cannot remain the same. He is forced to reckon with the parts of himself he has long ignored, his emotional wounds, his repressed desires, his hidden fears. In her presence, he is invited to explore the depths of his own soul, to embrace the unconscious aspects of himself that have been cast aside. He must learn to embrace his own vulnerability, to let go of the illusions of control and perfection that have long defined him. He must learn to feel, to truly feel, the depths of his emotions without fear or shame. For it is only in this emotional depth that he can begin to understand the feminine, and in doing so, understand himself. But this process is not linear. The path towards self-realization is often messy, filled with setbacks, moments of doubt, and intense emotional upheaval. The man may falter, may try to return to the comfort of his old ways, to the external validation he once craved. But the woman, in her silence, remains steady, unwavering in her own sense of self. She does not chase after him, does not try to force him into the process. She simply exists, and in her existence, she serves as a mirror that reflects the deepest parts of his own soul. In this reflection, he sees not just her, but himself. He sees the parts of himself he has long neglected, the parts that long for depth, for authenticity, for connection. As he continues his journey, the man begins to understand the true nature of the feminine. It is not something to be possessed, controlled, or understood through the lens of his ego. The feminine is a force, an energy that exists beyond the confines of his conscious mind. It is not about dominance or submission, but about the balance between strength and vulnerability, autonomy and connection. The woman who embodies the archetype of the feminine holds this balance perfectly, and in her, he finds not just a partner, but a guide, a reflection of the highest potential within himself. This is the gift she gives him, the gift of self-awareness, of emotional depth, of true freedom. She shows him that his worth does not lie in the approval of others, in the external accomplishments he has achieved, but in the deep connection he has with himself. And in this connection, he is free. He is free to step into his full potential, to embrace the fullness of his being, without fear, without shame, without the need for validation from anyone. The woman who knows her worth does not chase, she chooses. She chooses to be herself, to stand in her own power, to embrace her own truth. And in doing so, she becomes a force that cannot be ignored, a force that drives men to face their own unconscious fears, their own hidden desires, and ultimately, their own transformation.